anything. Let's put that.
Welcome, everyone. We apologize for the delay. Is everyone here? Yes, they are. I would like to put my glasses and advise that the board convened an executive session to consider matters leading to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, or dismissal of a particular person or persons and collective negotiations pursuant to the Taylor Law. I'd like to call this meeting to order and ask, which is why I haven't sat down, everyone to please rise and we can say the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, nation, liberty, justice for all.
We will start by asking if anyone has any amendments to the minutes from December 15th and our brief meeting on December 21st. Okay, there being no comments, those 2 minutes are approved. Thank you to our district clerk, Betty. Good job with them. I'd like to ask for a motion on the treasurer's report for September 22 and October 22. Is there a motion? Thank you. In a second. Any comments or questions?
I had a couple of questions.
Go for it. Thank you.
Okay. Pull out my papers. And a little bit of rush. Yes.
I was the last one here. I thought everyone was ready.
Okay. I just wanted some clarification. At page 7 of the report, it talks about like
September or October.
It's in both September and October, but I think I'm looking at the September version.
Thank you.
Okay, there's a note on the reserves that there's funds in transit, which are funds that are coming out of the reserves to go into a CD, even though the reserve balance will still be the same amount, but what's in the bank account is going to differ. My question was on those CDs, is that the new CDs that we talked about here that are the collaborative, collective CDs that Jamie recommended to us, or are they just separate CDs that we put into the bank? Because we do it both ways.
I believe it's the latter, but I'm going to verify that with Jamie, and we will get that back to you.
Okay. That was one of my questions. Okay. Second question. Looking at the student fund balance in the September 2023 report, there are clubs with some significant balances. Some of them I understand, like the trip funds, they collect the money ahead of time and they will not be dispersed until the trip is done. The middle school ski club has $6,389 as of September 1. Is that for the same reason that ski trips obviously were not taken in September? That's money that was collected this year for this year's students, or those balances that are carried over plus money that's collected?
I would have to look into that, but I do think, again, it's the latter. I think it's money that's collected plus that has not been spent on trips yet, plus a balance.
The balance. Okay. So I guess my question is, and we've talked about this in the extracurricular activities reports when we've audited them, if we are carrying over balances from prior years, I don't understand that with something that's a ski trip. I wouldn't understand that in a foreign exchange trip either, because the money should be collected for the students who are going on the trip. A $6,389 balance in September 1 is concerning to me, because if that is money, if that 6,000 is money that was carried over, then I have a question as to why that money was not returned to the students if they had collected extra money for the ski trip. That is money that was just collected this year. And I apologize. I didn't realize Jamie was not going to be here tonight. But if that was money that was just collected this year, and if that's money that was not collected this year and students are going to be utilizing that for this year, I don't, I would like to know, obviously we can get back to it next week. And I'm going to have that same question about, track and field. We have a $20,000 balance, I believe, as of the beginning balance was 19,000. The ending balance on on the 9/1 report was 12,000. Some of that was expended, but again, you have a big carryover. The beginning balance is $19,000. That's not for the students who are currently in the track and field club. That is not their money. That had to be money from prior year students. So we've gone through this for 10 years. Every time we do it, we've had 2 auditors reports on the classroom activity fund. We've talked about streamlining this process and having better accountability, and yet here we are, year 10 on the board, and I'm still seeing large balances that I think are carryovers for prior students' money that should not be being utilized for current student trips.
So the first thing we'll do is get clarity on how much is carryover and how much was collected this year, and we'll present that to you with more analysis on that.
Okay, next question. I'm looking at the general report 10/31/2022. I believe it's the same in the September report. You have an appropriations of 80,000 for LIPA hearings. The unencumbered balance is 28,000. My question is, is that just billable work, or does that include the DHC retainer that we're voting on today, or is that a separate amount that is in our budget item, that $5,500 a month retainer for DHC?
If the fund, if that balance, if the DHC retainer comes from that balance, is that the
Comes from
question?
the LIPA hearing line, or is that covered elsewhere? Here's my question, right? So we're not going to have LIPA hearings, right? It's done. So we're going to start talking about a budget. So if that is just going to be including hearings, I think we can change that budget item line moving forward. If it doesn't include the DHC retainer. We'll be happy to know. That's the end of my question.
I think they're good questions, and I
They
think
are
that
good questions.
the larger question, I guess, that stems from your final question is, as we do look at a world with LIPA clarity, how that will affect multiple budget lines.
Well, it's definitely gonna, it's gonna obviously reflect your.
I don't want
your
to call them out
legal-
now.
Yeah,
That's
your
exactly.
legal lines, but I don't know if that, because that's September 1, we did have work with agreements and all of that. And we had issues with the Nassau County as to how that pilot was going, because it's not even really a pilot, how that draft payment was going to be processed. So part of that 80,000 may have been spent on that. Part of it may have been the DHC, but I would anticipate moving forward that you wouldn't be incurring the kind of legal fees that we have incurred
That was, yeah, I agree with that.
in the past, and that would be an area where we could free up some money for a budget line for something else.
That makes sense. We still have 2 more, just for the community to understand. Obviously, we all know this, but there are still 2 more payments to come that we have to monitor and may need some assistance legally with. But certainly, the lion's share of the settlement and the legal issue is say, Dr. Wood. But yeah, so,
The other thing in there, I just want to mention, again, we'll give analysis in that, is the special counsel for LIPA, and some of those, fees from.
I would
lawsuits,
anticipate
the
it would
extent
be,
to which
but
that
I
was,
guess my,
again,
my
same
question
with
is,
that. Yeah.
yeah, it does it include, is VHC captured there? Is that someplace else? I mean, I assume that part of that, based upon the way I see the numbers going down, is our outside counsel fees, which are billed on an hourly basis, on a monthly basis to us, and those bills are reviewed. But I would anticipate that going forward, that part of it would be less, but depending on what happens with the VHC, that might be different. So we can look at, I don't know if that's captured elsewhere.
and it certainly could be. Yes.
It could be captured elsewhere. But you have the retainer for counsel, which is our regular retainer, and our labor negotiation retainer.
Just because it was done a certain way for the DHC fees last time doesn't mean they couldn't go in a different area.
Yeah.
Are there questions on the treasurer's report? Thank you. All right, all in favor of approving September and October? Aye, thank you. We will now move on to Samantha for our report from the SGO. Welcome.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did skip one. Sorry. But you know what? You already said thank you. Let's have it.
Tuesday, discuss we're talking about sports night as it's coming up soon, and we discussed that each group of grade officers next Tuesday will come in with 2 overall theme ideas for sports night and 4 sub themes for each of the grades. And I guess we'll decide next Tuesday. Besides that, we brought up again the idea of theme Fridays, and I think we're going to be moving forward with that.
Just because we have a couple younger students here, I won't put you on the spot, but just briefly, if you were describing what Sports Week was to a K through 8 person, how would you describe it? Like what goes on?
Sports night is
Sports night, sorry.
it's essentially the same thing as like field day or fun day. It's just indoors and there's dancing. That's how I would describe it. That's my experience of it. So
I think students generally do or do not look forward to.
everybody looks forward to it. It's like all that anybody talks about until like prom season starts. Everybody loves sports night and goes all out for it in terms of themes, which is why picking the themes is very important for the student government.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And we will now revert back to action item 5, which is the approval of some budget transfers. Is there a motion? Thank you. And I heard a second. Any comments or questions? I actually had a question, or actually it was more of a request, which will not be for tonight. But I'd like to ask the administration if we could just get a report on the annual TAN interest cost. A couple of years going backwards, obviously the world of interest has changed, and the cost of borrowing is a new paradigm. And so I'd just like to put some hard numbers on that.
And I know just in working with Mr. Pappas that we will do that, and that will also, in addition to that, be a key part of our budget presentation.
Okay, increased interest cost. Can't wait. Any other questions or comments? All right, all in favor of the transfers? Aye, thank you. We'll now move past 6, which I jumped out of turn, and move on to number 7, the report from our superintendent, Dr. Zublionis.
Good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year. Welcome to our first meeting of the new year. Thank you to Samantha, and I hope everybody has had a great start back and a refreshing break. Just a couple of announcements today. We will be holding our budget boot camp starting next week at 9:30 a.m. Central Office on January 10th, and on the 24th as well in the middle school library at 7 p.m. We have a lot of exciting student events coming up. We have National History Day on January 12th, and that's where our 8th graders present all their work on a great performance-based assessment experience that involves research for history. I won't try and be biased, but it is an amazing experience that Mr. Gordon and Mr. Dayhill at the middle school and all the teachers, social studies teachers in the middle school organized. So thank you, and we're looking forward to that. Middle school Winter 2 sports begin on January 17th, and we sent out a tweet and some messaging on Family ID being open for registration for those sports. So encourage families interested and students interested to begin that as well. Since it's a new year, I asked the Fab Five, our 5 principals, to report on some of the happenings in their buildings, and I really needed to contract. They reported so much, so thank you to your principals for reporting on all of the great work you're doing. So I'm just going to move quickly through a summary of some of these. At Glen Head, during the month of September, students focused on how they could demonstrate teamwork. October, how they could build long-lasting friendships. November, how they were grateful for their friends, teachers, and staff. And in December, they were busy celebrating in many different ways. Tomorrow, 27 students will be recognized by their teachers, lunch monitors, and Dr. Rupa for all their special ways they spread joy throughout the last month. This is part of a positive attribute, accentuate the positive celebration that Dr. Ruth has been working on with a committee of teachers all year. So thank you, Dr. Ruth, and Glen Head School. At Seacliff School, we had an amazing holiday extravaganza right before the break that was focused on goal setting, and also interim principal McCormick brought in atomic habits into how positive habits support goals. Throughout the school year and through the lens of the North Shore Journey. We also had an amazing collaborative musical experience with our high school music teachers and students who actually performed for the elementary students, and it was led by a high school student, the whole assembly, after Ms. McCormick was done. So it was really a tremendous experience, a lot of joy. At Glenwood Landing School, last spring, all students have participated in Project Move, for 1 week. It's a unique arts and education program powered by the mission to raise leaders through the arts. It's designed to build confidence, self-love, motivation, teamwork, and healthy exercise habits to ensure a positive experience in student activities. And it includes acting on different scenarios, crafting their own costumes, and dancing to a beat. It's supported by the Glenwood SCA, and it will also be supported this year. Today, they actually had the reboot of it for this year, and students had a wonderful experience. 5th graders will be the stars of a culminating performance in early March. Thank you, Principal Finder, for this update, and thank you, Glenwood SCA, for your support. From Principal O'Hara, the middle school, the Little Mermaid rehearsals are coming along well. They just moved to the high school theater, and the upcoming performances will be at the end of the month on January 27th and 28th. 8th grade English students just started their investigative journalism unit, and they had a presentation from Laura Albanese, a sports and investigative journalist from Newsday. Very authentic. Our students are preparing for National History Day, as we mentioned, and students are continuing to enjoy new spaces at the middle school. The new commons area when you first walk in to the middle school, which is really brilliant for theater and dance rehearsals, adaptive PE, group meetings, and special assemblies. And right before the break, we had a Viking Navigators presentation for the new Viking Navigators program, and they presented their proposals. Finally, at our high school, the North Shore High School Mandarin language learners participated in the NYU Rock the Movie contest, sponsored by New York University. And we won, our North Shore students won first prize for content and storytelling amongst all the high school performers. Special shout out to the movie crew: Nathaniel Brower, Julia Desario, Christopher Goslin, Gabriel Hebron, Ruben Schoenig, Emily White, and Michael Yates. Today we had an interesting visit from choral to the choral classes from the Binghamton University a cappella group, and they performed for the chorus students, facilitated a cappella singing workshops, and held a session on life in college. It was very, very exciting. Just some other high school events. The Alumni Roundtable, where our alumni come back every year. We'll have 10 alumni at least on the 10th. That's 10 on the 10th at 7 p.m. in the high school cafeteria for parents. And they'll also be having that round table for students during the day in the auditorium. Thank you to Mr. Doherty for organizing that, as well as the college night for parents of juniors on January 23rd and the 9th grade parent orientation on January 25th. We'll be communicating all of this out. Also wanted to mention, we have a very special parent university next week. It was changed to Wednesday the 11th on the calendar. It says the 12th, and we'll have Mr. Paul Anderson, who's an expert in science learning and the next generation science standards. He'll be working with our teachers all week, and he'll have a special, really special parent university. We're really going to press this one because it's a real treat for him to be here. thank you, Dr. Smythe and Mr. Minchell, for setting this up. And that'll be on Wednesday, the 11th, 7 p.m. in the middle school library, our Homes with Parent Universities.
It's actually going to be in the Commons area.
Oh, in the Commons area. Okay, thank you. Okay. Yeah, well, on the calendar was the 12th, so I moved it back one day. And then finally, UPK, we're finalizing our universal pre-K, and I want to thank Dr. Rufa and Ms. McCormick for all their help in securing locations and graciousness of our teachers for moving out of locations. It really, I'm never surprised by, it's hard to do to make these sacrifices, but our teachers never surprise me in their spirit and their energy in making things work. We'll have more free rooms next year. We are waiting. We've gotten a lot of questions about pre-K for next year. Hopefully in this January state aid run that we get in, hopefully by January 20th, Mr. Pappas and I will know if we have funds for UPK for next year. But we're working towards filling almost all the seats at the Glen Cove YMCA, at Glen Head School through Scope Educational Services, and at Seacliff School through Scope Educational Services. It will begin on February 1st. We'll have parent orientations that the Y will organize for those students and that we'll organize with Scope. We're really excited for that, and I look forward to meeting our new youngest Vikings and to take some pictures and sharing with the community what our UPK program is doing. Very long update, but thank you very much for the opportunity and welcome everyone.
Thanks, Chris. 10 on the 10th. I appreciate you.
10 on the 10.
I know you like to incorporate the Z, so it's not Zen on the 10. Okay.
Not this time.
Not this time. Feel free. Item 8 is a little bit different this meeting, and I want to just explain. Normally, what we like to do is we get some financial business out of the way. We have our discussion topic item to let people know what's going on in the district, which we do have tonight, which we really invite everyone to stay tuned in for, which will be discussing the student achievement in the STEM areas. And then we have public comment afterwards, with the theory being that we can have folks comment to us, which we love to hear, and we invite folks to share their thoughts, but have it come after we have our discussion, because it can help inform the public comments. That said, there are times, such as last meeting, where a discussion that we have can be very long. We had 2 long discussions. We had some beautiful music from our madrigals. We had some great student celebration. But the meeting did get a little long and a little late. And there were some folks in the audience who we were aware did want to come and share some thoughts about what was going on in the district. So we decided for this meeting, and again, we don't have to have, like, through open meeting laws, any public comment, but this board has always, as long as I've been on it, really valued hearing from the community. You can always email us. I promise you, all trustees read all the emails that we get, and it's an important part of the process. But speaking here at the podium and directing your comments directly to us and to the videotape that is being broadcast for everyone who's tuning in is a different kind of experience that we wanted to extend. So in short, we are having a public comment section right now for any topic that you would like, and then we'll be having a second public comment section later in the evening after our discussion. So if anyone would like to come to the podium now and share some thoughts, we're available. If not, we will reopen again. Thank you. And the only requirement is just state your name and town of residence, please. When you start talking, the mic will just turn on pretty quickly. I hope it does. Just speak directly into it. It should pick up. Yeah, there you go.
There you go. Matt Syracuse from Seacliff. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. I just wanted to say first that both my children passed through the school district. They were part of robotics, which was a great program, and went on to a great college experience as well. I want to bring a matter to your attention regarding the middle school dumpster specifically, and I'm asking for someone's attention to this, and they could run with this. The dumpster pickup is between 5:20 and 6:20 a.m., which violates the town of Oyster Bay code by 7 a.m. and Seacliff by 8 a.m. So the neighbors have tried to contact the town of Oyster Bay. I have contacted the facilities department at the school district, going back several years. I have email trails on that, getting no traction. So I'm asking for someone to take ownership here that can resolve this and have it pick up at a reasonable time.
Yeah, thank you. And first of all, I apologize for that. I will work with Mr. Hall, Mr. Pappas, and get to work immediately on that.
Spoken with both of them over the years, and it's kind of, you know, that they move the time for a little while, and then they keep coming back at these earlier hours. And this is 5 days a week. And for some reason, every Tuesday and Friday morning, somewhere around 5 a.m., there's a loud banging. If it's another dumpster drop or something, I don't know what it is, but if you can resolve these things, we greatly appreciate it. All right.
I'll become involved now. Definitely.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, appreciate it. Oh.
Well, Mike Conklin, Greenvale, president of North Shore Athletics Booster Club. I just want to ask the board to continue working on the coaching policy. I don't want it to slip into the background, and I would like you to focus on making it as simple as possible. The last board meeting, very lengthy. It was discussed quite a bit, but I just have this feeling that when this policy was enacted, it certainly didn't get this kind of attention. And I don't see why it needs so much attention to be drawn out. That's it. Thank you very much.
Mike. And I appreciate you sitting through the last one that was quite so long. And of course, we all appreciate the Booster Club. The coaching policy is on the agenda for adoption later tonight. There'll be a discussion and a vote. As with all votes or most votes, we'll see where that takes us. But it's on tonight's agenda for sure. Other comments from the public, with the caveat there will be another one. Okay, I will close this public comment period number 1, and I will turn it over to our discussion of student achievement. This is the third in our series. The first was in athletic and arts. The second was in the humanities, and here we are with STEAM. All equally valued, not putting one in front of the other, but this does wrap up this portion, and I will turn it over to our superintendent, Dr. Zublionis. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ludmore. And I want to thank Mr. Menchel, Ms. DiMiola, Dr. Smythe, and also our other administrators who are here, Mr. Marino, Ms. McCormick, and we have Ms. Kay here, and some students. We're excited for the presentation. This is almost the last in what I'm calling the Smythe series of achievement reports. Next week, it's not an achievement report, next meeting, but we do have our world languages program review presentation from Ms. Aguilar and Dr. Smythe. So thank you. We're really looking forward to this. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Smythe.
It's a Smythe section?
No,
We'll
Smythe,
that.
pure
That's
pure
that'll be the last one, I swear.
So we'd like to ask you to just move down to the seats in the front, and then we'll get started.
Really cool.
On behalf of Ms. Demiola and Mr. Minchell, I just want to thank you for this opportunity to report to you on our student achievement in the STEM fields. This evening, we'll look at that achievement through the lens of one of our shared valued outcomes. We're focusing on problem solving this evening. So you'll hear from students, teachers, and administrators on how our work with that shared valued outcome of problem solving evolves over the years. So most importantly, we'd like to start with our students. So Ms. Kay has brought some of our students from Wonder League here, and we're excited for them to share.
Thank you, Dr. Smythe. I'm Adrienne Kay. I'm one of the elementary STEAM teachers. And tonight we have two members of our Wonder League Club, Margot Bear and Sylvie McAdams. And they will be telling us a little bit about their problem solving through our Wonder League Club. So just to share a little bit of background information, Wonder League is a worldwide coding club that involves Dash, our robot over there. And every year a new set of challenges are put out. And the challenges usually have a theme. And this year's theme is all about STEAM and really going into the different aspects of the S, T, E, A, and M. So Wonder League is a 5th grade club that we run across all three of our elementary schools. The teams meet virtually. So the students have to actually find a team and they find a place to meet. We loan out the robot and the equipment. And then Mr. Bridgewood and I run a virtual club every Wednesday after school. And each week we kind of put out a new mission. So today, what Margot and Sylvie are going to do is they're going to kind of tell us a little bit about one of the missions that they've been working on this year and really focusing on, as Dr. Smythe said, looking at that and their work through that mission through the lens of problem solving. So without further ado, I'm going to give them some microphones so they can tell you a little bit about our work together. Looking at different inventors in time. So the idea was that Dash had to kind of go back in time, meet the inventor, learn about the invention, and then get back to a portal to come back to the current time. So why don't we talk a little bit about what the rules of this challenge were? And Sylvie, could you tell us a little bit about, there were 2 pieces of code that had to be part of the code of the program we wrote for Dash. And they realized that if the Dash could only turn in 15-degree increments, right? How many degrees are there in a circle? So tell us a little bit about some of the problem solving that went into that aspect of it. Before, so, but then we looked and we realized that in order for Dash to do something 24 times, we had to use a repeat loop, right? But what did we realize about the repeat loop? Where did the problem solving come in? That's what we had to do with those 2 repeat loops. Now, is that your only option for this? So why don't we show the board a little bit of your code? I'm just going to put, while we see up here, we see that Dash started. Margot, could you show us where Dash is starting? Why don't we tell a little bit about while you're both working together on actually writing the code and solving the problem, what is a strategy that you use to help you with that? Why don't we start the code and then maybe we could talk about the other problem that came about after Dash got around the ice cream cone, the ice cream maker. All right. This is where the turn 15 start. It has to be able to turn 15 degrees over and over and over again, make a full circle, and then come back. It goes slowly. Patience is something we always practice with our coding. Challenges since then, right? We've had other things where we weren't necessarily able to, like we had to maybe use the sensors to have Dash do something, right? In different challenges, we get different parameters or different criteria. Of course, of course. Great question. I don't know. Have we even made that observation? Oh, maybe it's just blinking. It's just blinking. That's a great question, Oscar. No, really interesting. I love that we're even looking into that aspect of it. So now we're almost getting done with the loop. So why don't we talk a little bit about what happened after Dash made that loop around the ice cream maker? Some like role playing as the programmer versus the robot, some trial and error of trying different things. And why don't we talk a little bit, I'm kind of springing this on you. Have there been any problems that you've had to solve in terms of teamwork or managing who works with the robot or who works with the Chromebook? Has that come about at all? Yeah, tell us a little bit about how you problem solve maybe through that. like a lot of flexibility kind of in a challenge like that. Why don't we show the video of your completed mission? Because one of the things that I also appreciate most, we all do, about what Margot and Sylvie do, is that after they solve all their problems and they finish their challenge, they really take the extra step of making a video that's exciting to watch, and they always put a little extra detail in there. That's them. As you can see, it's the challenge that we just saw, but they always take the extra step of making sure that they're really communicating what they did. A bunch of retakes. Mm-hmm. Okay, Margo, this is excellent. So as the video is kind of finishing up, I don't know if the board has any questions that they would like to ask. If anybody would like to come down and see some parts of our robot or our mat, or ask some questions of our awesome programmers, you're welcome to. Sure, Ms. Mosca.
So I'm really impressed with this. I actually spent a career working with computers, and I started out as a programmer and had to learn, a lot of the things you guys are talking about. So I'm so impressed. I didn't get to do it in 5th grade though. So I'm curious, you talked about how when you were designing this, at first Dash took the wrong direction around the circle. Why was it the wrong direction? What were you trying to achieve by why was it important to have it go a certain direction? Was because and you only wanted it making left turns. The challenge was given to you, the criteria were given to you, and you had to, okay, got it. So you had to then make sure that I'm sorry, I keep saying he. Isn't that crazy? Yeah, it is, absolutely. You had to make sure that it made the fewest moves according to the criteria, which is, I don't know if you've learned this concept, but doing that is called coding elegantly. It's actually considered elegant when you're not wasting moves. It used to be important. Computers have infinite capacity now, but it used to be important. Thank you so much.
All right, Sylvia, Margot, well done. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Sure. And I will actually come to this in a few minutes, but as part of our elementary STEAM program, we want to make sure that kids are involved in both assured experiences so that all kids have certain opportunities. So, for example, all kids will have opportunities with robotics as part of their STEAM work in school. But what we've done over the years under the guidance of Ms. Kay and Mr. Bridgewood is had and with the support of the board and the district, been able to put in place many clubs that kids have the opportunity to sign up for. One of the things we've done with our STEAM clubs, because at the elementary level, because we have the 3 elementary schools, is we've made them clubs that bring kids from all 3 schools together. So we have 2 actual coding opportunities for kids. One is in 2nd grade, where we've done the first Lego League Junior, and one is in 5th grade. So all 5th graders are invited to be part of this club. This club is actually run virtually, like Ms. Kay mentioned. So kids will form teams, they'll get the challenges, and they'll meet virtually with Mr. Bridgewood and Ms. Kay every Wednesday, I believe it is. Since it's virtual, what they'll do is actually, they'll meet at they'll have a team, and the team might decide to meet at someone's home. No, we lend them out to them. Yeah. So what, basically this was actually came after the pandemic. When we were actually having this club live, we ran into difficulties with it being in one elementary school versus the other. So what we found is by doing it virtually, we could start a little bit later. Kids had the opportunity to get home, get to wherever their team was, and then they'll work physically in somebody's home, and then they'll meet with Mr. Bridgewood and Ms. Kay via computer. And it also encourages them to continue to code on their own after. But basically, we're lending out the materials for the season, but we feel like it's a good investment. So, any other questions about that before we transition to other pieces? So again, that was a look at kids problem solving. So now what we'll do is Amy, Steve, and I will talk about achievement in our areas, and then you'll hear some teacher voices. So I'll start with our elementary STEM. We'll start with some strengths. So in math, the data from our standardized assessments confirms information from our range of formative assessments and really suggests that our students are becoming very strong mathematical problem solvers. We attribute this strength to the high quality learning experiences in which our teachers engage our students. Those experiences are aligned with our K-12 philosophy of math learning. Those experiences really prioritize our students' growth as problem solvers, but simultaneously support their growth with mathematical concepts, processes, and skills. Also working to build their positive attitudes about themselves as mathematicians and their metacognitive skills. So really that's one of our first strengths, and you'll see that in our assessment data. In comparison to the students in surrounding districts, the county, and the nation, the data from our standardized assessments really suggests that our students are doing very well. You'll see this by comparing the items on our assessments, but also the percentages of students scoring at proficiency and mastery. As we turn our attention to science, we've transitioned to new science standards and embraced those instructional approaches. But what you'll see from our standardized assessment data is our students are really demonstrating strengths in the life sciences, the earth sciences, and the physical sciences. And again, not necessarily reflected directly in our standardized assessment data, but more indirectly. One of our strengths is really that design and implementation of our STEAM program, where we have kids K through 5 really engaged in hands-on STEAM learning experiences, where they get exposure to the disciplines, build foundational skills, but also develop that, innate interest and passion about STEAM. And I think you saw that from these 2 young women tonight. As we turn our attention to areas of focus and need, one of the absolute necessities of students is to develop the ability to communicate their mathematical thinking, both verbally and in writing. This is an area we've been focused on for quite a few years. We've shown growth in that area, but it's definitely something we continue to focus on. We've incorporated journaling as part of our mathematical lesson structure, so kids are having regular opportunity to really write about explain, articulate that mathematical thinking. And within the classroom, really to explain it verbally, because we really want kids not only to be able to do the math, but to be able to really explain their mathematical thinking. So that's been an ongoing focus. One of the outcomes we've seen after the pandemic is some of our students are still showing some deficits with respect to fact fluency. In fact, fluency is important only because if kids are devoting their cognitive energy to figuring out what 7 times 8 is, they really can't devote that energy to the problem solving piece. So to address this, we've incorporated additional research-based lessons focused on fact fluency, and are also continuing to encourage practice in that area. And we're already seeing growth in that area. Another ongoing area of focus is really our attention to equity. Our data is strong, but if you do look into our data, you will see some of our subgroups definitely are not performing as well as others. In particular, some of our students identified as English language learners and students identified with disabilities. So we continue to really work to personalize and individualize instruction, but also to look at more global approaches in terms of how we can close those gaps. And, near and dear to all of our hearts, we continue to work on that incorporation of performance-based assessments, because we really feel that those are the best ways for our students to demonstrate their learning. So that's our elementary, and now I'm going to turn it over to Amy to talk about secondary math.
Good evening, everybody. So I think we'll find a lot of consistency between what Carol, Steve, and I have to say, and it speaks a lot about the continuity of the K-12 program that we have. We have so much to be proud of, and on those successes, we will continue to build. So I'm going to highlight some of the things that were discussed in the report that we shared, some of the standardized testing data that I think is worth discussing. Some of the key measures that we investigate to help us understand student achievement are passing and mastery rates. And in 2022, these measures serve both as a point of pride and an opportunity for continued growth. And to put those rates into perspective, after several years of uncertainty, we seek markers against which to compare ourselves. So one helpful vantage point is to understand how did we perform relative to our peers across the region. We ask, did we experience similar rises and falls? Did we increase our students' performance more or less in comparison to our peers? And, we follow such trends using a gap to the region measure. So for 2022, we can proudly say that our regional gap measures remained impressive and in some cases increased quite substantially. Like in the case of Algebra 2, the gap to the region went from single digits to nearly 20%. So this consistently strong measure indicates that our performance was in keeping with our relative performance before the pandemic, and also that our approach to teaching and learning in the unprecedented times that we had was in keeping with our esteemed counterparts across the region. We actually worked closely together between districts to share best ideas in such an emergency time. We always have and we always will, but in that time we actually particularly leaned on each other. So I think that's worth celebrating too. So a regional comparison allows us to understand our relative performance, but we can never rest. It will never allow us to rest in our efforts to increase the achievement of every student. We recognize there's still growth to make in terms of returning to and exceeding the mastery rates of 2019. Our rates in 2022 for mastery ranged from 31 to 48%, depending on the test that you were looking at. Whereas in 2019, they ranged from like 48 to 59%. So there's still some recovery there. And in order to address this, our plan as a department is to examine every single student at the mid-year, after midterms, after the winter STAR exams, and make strategic plans sort of aimed at the movement of students from one performance level to the next. And we'll do that as a team. Another measure regarding our data that merits analysis was our progress with an important subgroup of North Shore students, our students with disabilities. We've done some excellent work with this group of students, and we also have plenty of opportunity to continue to build. But there are some things we're really proud of it and something to share. On examination of this subgroup's scores, we noticed across the entirety of Nassau County, our sixth grade students with disabilities had the second highest passing rate in the county and the smallest gap to the gen ed population. And across the grade levels, we showed similarly strong performance for this subgroup. But it's also notable to mention that we had some extraordinary outcomes for algebra. This subgroup had both the highest passing and mastery rates in the county. And with success comes opportunity for further growth. We're, proud of such notable performance in this group of students, but there remains a gap between their performance and the general population. And so our efforts to lift every student will include continued attention to their unique and varied needs through strong delivery of RTI. And it's just a practice that we have all the time, constantly, careful consideration of individual learning needs on a granular level. So our 3 to 8 exams and the standardized test provide feedback on specific skills and that are performed in a traditional testing setting. But such measures are only part of the story. We seek to grow students as problem solvers, as we saw tonight, collaborators, communicators, thinkers, innovators, committed individuals. We take that very seriously, and we recognize how influential assessment design can be on those outcomes. So one point of great pride for our department has been a recently concerted effort to enhance our assessment practices with project-based assessments and performance tasks. And this year, our department is piloting such assessments in every course. We're examining their impact as a team, and we'll be refining those assessments for maximum impact. And looking ahead, we're excited to incorporate more project and performance-based assessments into our work with students. We believe the strongest measure of student achievement is a composite of a healthy variety of measures taken together to tell the most complete story of learning. Finally, work is underway to design for the implementation of New York's new computer science and digital fluency standards, set for partial implementation in fall of 24 and full implementation in the fall of 25. So we're currently taking inventory of which standards are fulfilled in the current set of assured experiences that are available to our students. And then from there, we are eager to design additional experiences that ensure access to the complete set of standards by the time our students graduate. So with that, I'm excited to introduce my esteemed partner, Mr. Menchel, my partner in STEM leadership at the secondary level, and he will discuss student achievement in science.
Good evening, everyone. Happy New Year. Nice to see everybody. I take a lot of pride in representing or getting the honor to represent the North Shore 6 to 12 Science Department, who continues to outperform our region in important test scores and other related data. I do want to mention most of the data, obviously, that is available through IDW, deals with Regents examinations. So I do want to give a shout out to our 6th and 7th graders, which is really, especially in the transition over to the next generation science standards, since they're not attached to a state test, that's really where a lot of the magic, as well as within the elementary levels, for the next generation transition exists. The students there really are working with concepts of plain evidence reasoning and drawing models and really thinking like a scientist. And while this is certainly taking place in all the other grade levels, the state exams haven't caught up to the new way of method of teaching. So that is coming within the next 2-3 years, where the exams will have a better connection to that. And certainly all grades are doing a great job with making the transition. Part of NGSS is actually, there's a lot of, initials and abbreviations and everything, but CCC or CCC for cross-cutting concepts. structure and function, cause and effect, energy and systems. These are all, interwoven lines that extend throughout the sciences. And it occurred to me that one metric point or graph that I couldn't locate on IDW is another CCC, which is really the care, concern, and creativity that our science teachers give to every student. And I have no doubt that if such a qualitative metric could be represented, we would certainly be outperforming the best schools within the region as well. While this information can't be easily graphed, it certainly can be credited as the main reason for all of our areas of strength and growth. As I walk through the halls of both buildings, throughout the day, I rarely see the same classroom setup twice. I'm not talking about activities. I'm talking about actual setup of desks and chairs and, kids sitting or kids standing where they are in the room. In fact, one of the largest supply requests I've been getting lately are for like lab tables on casters that can easily be moved around and manipulated and rearranged for performance-based tasks that the students are conducting every day. And that can help explain, I think, why North Shore students outperform the region, not only in, multiple choice type factual questions, but we really outperform the region on constructed response or like part 2 type questions by as much as 12.3% on some of the exams. And this number increases even more dramatically to 14% when you look at the percentage of perfect scores on the Earth Science Lab Practical. 38% of our 9th graders earned a perfect score of 16 out of 16 for Lab Practical, which is really impressive. If I continue my walk throughout the science halls, I also see skilled teams of co-teachers at every grade level using strategies that help all of the students know that they can be successful. And I think that's why we see so many more North Shore students who are classified as disabled challenging themselves with upper level science classes. Courses like chemistry and physics, I kind of realized, well, falling down some of the wormholes you go down when you're doing this type of research, that North Shore had such a higher percentage of students classified as disabled that were taking the chemistry regions as opposed to the rest of the region. We actually had 14% of classified students taking the chemistry regions, whereas the region itself had 4%. And I really think that, to me, that speaks volumes about the safety and the comfort level that our students feel in the classroom. And I think that freedom for risk-taking is also evident in the large number of students who are challenging themselves with college-level science classes. This was especially exemplified by our new AP Chemistry class that was offered for the first time last year to 10th graders as one of the levels of chemistry they could take. And 87% of our students scored on the AP exam at levels 3, 4, and 5. Also, the many offerings of AP, IB, and dual enrollment classes, excuse me, it's a 2-week book. AP, IB, and dual enrollment classes also help explain why 94% of seniors are enrolled in the science experience at North Shore, even though that is not required for graduation. We require a 3-year sequence of a lab science at the high school. If kids wanted to, they could, take the 4th year and do something else, but 94% of them are continuing either with a lab class, the majority with a lab class, or at the very least a science elective that is offered for them. And I think that, that was another one of those little data facts I wasn't even looking for that when I realized that was really impressive. We also continue to celebrate successes in science research, and we are continuing to dive even deeper into the new next generation science standard learning standards as we prepare for those new exams that are going to be implemented over the next couple of years. Dr. Zuglianos mentioned Paul Anderson being here next week, so we're really excited about that. It's a really great opportunity. It's funny, if you don't know Paul Anderson, he's literally a science rock star to the students. We first became familiar with him in AP IB classes where his videos were assigned as like a flipped classroom type of thing. And that level of student that were taking AP Bio specifically, just when he showed up a couple of years ago, he was here, it was like I'm going to date it. For me, it's like Bruce Springsteen walking in, to the building. So it's really incredible. He's a really great speaker, and now he's dedicated himself to the next generation science. So while all of these areas of strength are growth, while it's all true, it's not perfect, and it does create room for areas of focus and need. And I think they balance off each other. So because we have so many students taking science classes and exams, I think we need to work hard on implementing strategies that will help increase our mastery levels for all students. I think part of the thing that was missing in these past couple of years were midterms. I'm personally glad that midterms are back because it's a good check-in point, but we've also used them in the past to try and identify students who were kind of on borderline mastery. It's a lot easier to know a student that's really struggling in a course and know that you need to work with that student. I think it's a lot harder to identify a student who is like really close to being at an 85 plus mastery level. By using the midterms to identify those students, we have our teachers conference with those students and really talk to them about mistakes that they had made and try and really get into their metacognitive thinking as to why they did what they did. And we've done that in the past, and it really has proved helpful. So I'm excited to be able to do that again. Since we offer so many options, we also need to streamline certain classes and create opportunities that hopefully will lower the redundancy of the curriculum and increase enrollment. This is especially true in our second year HL physics class, where enrollment tends to be pretty low. Carol and I, along with, remember Dr. Titone? With Dr. Titone and some of the physics teachers have already begun that conversation of looking at what might be a better second year option. And there are things that are already in the work for that. And also, while so much of our learning happens through project-based tasks, we need to make sure that our assessments match our experiences. So while we're really good at teaching through project-based, I think we have to play a little catch up on assessing through project-based assessments. And that's something that we're going to continue to work on. So as we continue to work on these focus areas, I optimistically invite anybody here tonight to take that walk with me through the science halls and sharing the wonderful work that our students and teachers are doing here. So the next part, you're going to get to hear virtually from some teachers. This is a page out of one of our shared value outcome progressions. This one is on problem solving. We have these progressions for every one of the SVOs. The administrators started working on this at least 5 or 6 years ago, and through the leadership of Dr. Guglionis and Dr. Smythe and all the directors who worked on this, my brain still hurts from some of the sessions we had while, going through the order of sophistication skills, and it was really one of the best learning experiences that I had had. But in a nutshell, what we tried to do, so this is for problem solvers, is we identified a larger skill concept. So problem finding, you can't solve a problem unless you find the problem first. And then within that, the sub skills. So you need to identify the problem and then analyze the problem. And then these are the behaviors that we would look for within the students. The columns here are lower level sophistication up to higher skill sophistication. So obviously we're trying to get our students to progress to the higher level. So this is just an easier way to view this. These are the 3 larger skill concepts for problem solving, which is the focus of the STEM classes, at least for purposes of tonight. And then the sub skills for each one of those. What we're going to show you now is a video. It's about 18 minutes or so. It's basically a group of STEM teachers from all building levels and all of the different departments within STEM talking about how they help their students develop as problem solvers. And then just to let you know, there's going to be 3 short interwoven segments of a math class in action that kind of show their discussion come to life a bit. So hopefully you'll enjoy this. It was really great to do, and we couldn't have done it without the help of Jason Domingo, who's a fine arts teacher in the high school, who is very savvy with camera and editing equipment, and one of his students, Chris, I always forget about that, Chris Gosling, who also helped put this together.
So again, thank you for the opportunity to show you a little bit of what's going on in elementary STEM, secondary science, secondary math, secondary technology. But we really want to thank our coders this evening, our teachers who are part of our discussion, and like Mr. Menchel mentioned, Mr. Domingo and Christopher Goslin, who did our video production and editing. So we'll invite you to come back up and we'll answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Certainly want to thank Dr. Smythe, Amy DiMiola, Steve Menchel, production team that put all that together. That was a lot of information and it shows a lot of what's going on. It's hard to translate the totality of so much of our academic program into this night, but I think it was an excellent job. So thank you. I will turn it over to my fellow trustees. And do you have any questions or comments for our team? STEM team? Yep, Rich, please go ahead.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I apologize not being able to get down there to see it. I'm not doing too well with my back right now. But I could hear what was going on, and I do appreciate the work that was done. I have a couple of specific questions about some of the backup material that we had. I noticed that in secondary science, we did pretty well, in fact, very well, I think, in terms of our standardized test scores in biology and other science, looking at the region scores. The comparison between 2019 and 2022 they were very, very close. So that's very commendable, you know, under the circumstances that everybody's been through over the last 2 years. The other scores, though, for chemistry and physics were not so wonderful. And I have my own beliefs in terms of why I think that happened. But, you know, in reading the backup, I realized that you gave the students in those particular courses many, many opportunities to prepare for those exams. You had extra help sessions, you offered mock exams, and that's all very laudable. Unfortunately, based upon what I read, the students didn't kind of jump on the bandwagon. So I'm wondering if you think a big part of that problem stemmed from the fact that there was a no penalty policy in terms of those exams at the end of the year. And the younger students are a little bit more in tune with doing the quote unquote right thing. And as they get older and older and get more and more jaded, they don't necessarily feel that. And they become a little bit more clever. And their attitude was, these tests, if I do well, great. And if I don't do well, who cares? They don't count. Did anybody look at that in terms of that being an issue, particularly in physics? When I found out last year what happened in physics, I was not happy.
Thanks, Rich. I hope you're back for better soon.
Thank you.
You know, I don't disagree with what you are speaking with. I think, you know, in general, the results in chemistry across the region from other directors I spoke to, I mean, they were down across the board, which is not an excuse for why we still shouldn't be an exemplar in you know, within our performance. I think it's hard to necessarily say, in terms of the no harm, the effect that that really had overall. I appreciate you reading the report to the, and talking about the opportunities we gave the students that unfortunately many didn't take advantage of. The chemistry students, especially if you think about their COVID experience, many of them, so when they were in 8th grade, there was no living environment regions for them. And then in 9th grade, earth science was given, but I think we only had like maybe 40 or 43% of our earth science students that year take it. So there was a large percentage of the chemistry students that this was the first regions that they were taking. Mix in the no harm. And, I think to some degree it was a perfect storm for imperfection. I am confident that we are in a much better place this year, just in seeing the student work. And I think, again, not to waive midterms as the be all end all. Also, last year there were no midterms too, which I think did have an effect. So I think we are definitely in a much better position going forward with chemistry. I should mention, in terms of the physics, basically no students took the physics read. There were 3 students that took it. We had decided to offer a local final for physics because it was the Regents exam was the morning after prom. And between the no harm policy and that, we offered a local final, but unfortunately, really, students just didn't take either of those seriously because at the end of the day, it didn't impact their grade for the year. So again, I think it was a strange set of circumstances. Certainly, the past couple of years have been a strange set of circumstances. We're monitoring closely. This year, we're making changes. Certainly, we're holding all the physics students will be accountable for taking the Regents this year. We've already made that clear to them. And, I think we're trying to get back to that normalcy within chemistry.
Thank you. I have other questions, but I'm gonna let my other trustees speak first.
Thanks, Rich. Sorry, Steve, just one of my questions directly relates to that. Just in terms of those backup numbers, in those physics scores, not just the Regents level, but also the AP, IB, it was kind of a similar story. Is it similar reasoning or?
No, I mean, there was no, there doesn't exist a no harm, obviously, for that. I think certainly, look, the AB physics scores were dismal. I mean, they were. I think you had a few kids who, there were five kids or so that were taking it. Talking about spring semester seniors at the end of a rigorous year. They know the colleges they're going to. They also know what score they would need to get college credit. Again, these are not reasons for students. At the end of the day, we're the educators, and we need to motivate our students into always performing at top level. So I think the AP physics scores were, a lot better than the IB physics scores, certainly. Yeah, the AP physics scores actually, I mean, they were okay. they weren't, I mean, we still had, 21 students score at the 3 or 4. Actually, 22 students score at the 3, 4, and 5 level. I mean, granted, it was just 1 at the 5 level, but I think those still fall within the realm of acceptability. But
It was partly contrasted to pretty strong scores at living environment.
yeah, and yeah, I agree.
Great. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to reiterate, like Steve mentioned, physics is something we're looking at both in terms of performance and our course offerings going forward.
Great, yeah, thank you. Other trustees, Maria, would you?
I can always find something to say because this just all these presentations fascinate me no end, and I'm so grateful for all the tremendous efforts that every single person has put into this. And thank you for this extra time and the prodigious backup material. The 139 pages of the STEM backup was a little intimidating, but also very exciting. I had one specific question to make sure that I understood something you said, Steve, but then a more general question maybe for both you and Amy. I was just trying to, I want to make sure I didn't miss your point about the 6th and 7th grade scientists and the catching up of the state exams to them. Am I completely off base thinking that you're implying that there will be regents at those levels at some point?
No, I'm sorry, excuse me. No, I'm sorry. If what I was trying to say is that there are no state exams for 6th or 7th grade. There's no plans for an exam, which frees those students up right now to be able to take a deep dive into NGSS practices, as opposed to current Regents classes where the Regents is still based on the old core curriculum for those courses. So it's an awkward transition. On one hand, we're trying to teach with the practices of NGSS, even in those Regents classes, but yet at the end of the year, they're taking an older style Regents exam. Those Regents are going to become more performance-based within the next, 3 to 4 years is what it's scheduled. So, yeah, does that clarify?
Yes, I think I should be happy that my daughter's in 7th grade. More generally, I'm going to plunge in, although I don't know that I have this question fully formed yet. It was something that I addressed in one of the previous presentations, Amy, for you as well. And you probably know why I'm asking it, but I've been thinking a lot about the stress level that our students at various grades deal with. Talked about, it was interesting hearing the element, and by the way, the teachers who were videotaped too, it was so interesting to feel like, a fly on the wall listening to them. It's frustrating, as you get as your child gets older and older and get less and less time to meet with the teachers to hear their ideas. That was quite thrilling. So please thank them again. They talk about how when the students are, K through 2, the kids tend to be, they're very uninhibited. They're not worried about failure. As they get older, there's this progression towards, wanting to be better and better at what they do, wanting to get it right, not wanting to go through, not feeling like a failure if things do fail during their progression of learning. And then ironically, in the case that Rich was just questioning, maybe as spring semester seniors, they're like, oh, what the hell? But I'm struggling because I think my kid, again, my best lens into this type of consideration is right in the middle of that, and in some cases, able to be in a more advanced situation. But I worry constantly about the level of stress that this creates. There's an element of excitement and wanting to rise to the challenge. But at the same time, there's a lot of what I think is misplaced, concern about getting a good grade, having to, keep up a certain reputation as a good student. And, in 7th grade, I feel like it's still a little bit too early for that. I want to slow that down a little bit, and I want to make sure that, we're not overemphasizing it. I'm sorry, it's a difficult question to formulate, but I'm just trying to get your feedback. You're on, you're dealing with this constantly. We have such a large continuum of learners, that subgroup of kids who really deal with trying to do everything well all the time is one that I wonder, how do we identify them? How do we know that they're not falling through the cracks in a similar way that kids in another subgroup might be, but are more easily identified?
Thank you for that question, Maria. That's super thoughtful. And we think about that too. We worry about that too. And I know our colleague Dan Doherty has been working so hard on SEL with our students and trying to understand what drives when students feel extra stressed. And we know that grading it's an age-old beast, right? And there's as many ways as there are to grade, there's twice as many opinions on how to do it. And as the grade levels increase, as students grow up, there's changing opinions on how that should look. And sometimes it's the way it's always been done. And sometimes this is what college is like. And sometimes, and so, I think we're paying a lot of extra attention to, how, the moment grades are put in front of a student, how that makes them feel and what that says about their belief system, about themselves, their identity as a student. And I think one thing that we've been working really hard on in the last year, and I hope we start to see the dividends of this really soon, is attention, like just real cognition over what the impact of that value. So as long as that value has to be a part of their lives, right? So I'm not going to give away where I really stand on this, but as long as that numerical value has to be part of their lives, what can we do to influence their experience with that? So for me personally, in the math department, I can speak. A year ago this week, January, was when we kicked off a collective study, and we did not relent for 6 months straight. In all of our department meetings, we studied assessment. We studied recovery of lost points, what that looks like across the board. How could we get onto the same page as a department about that, and what does that mean philosophically, in terms of, when you take a test, is that it? Are you done? Do we expect you to, do we say you got an 85? That means I always think you've earned an 85 in this and you'll never grow. Or if you do go ahead and grow, how do we make sure that's acknowledged in your grade? And it's a sticky and difficult thing to come to a conclusion about, but it's something that we heightened awareness very high among our teachers, and now that's part of the discussion, an active part of the discussion. And the other thing that we really leaned into was, as I said before, the performance tasks, because especially in math, traditionally it's paper, pencil, sit and take a test, and that's how no matter all of the exploration and fascinating, fun things that can happen inside of a math classroom, if the only way, at the end of the day, we're walking away and saying, well, I'm going to now just to go ahead and judge you on this very narrow set of what it means to be a mathematician. So what we've gone and done is, and the buy-in from teachers was astounding and really impressive, that people would take that leap of faith. And I think it was the many months of collective research and, wrestling over ideas, and this sort of year that we're taking to take some risks and assess them. But each course is implementing some sort of non-traditional assessment somewhere in the course, somewhere in a unit, somewhere, where they can start to feel out what does it look like to test out other components of what it means to be a mathematician, and broaden a student's ability to say, sure, yeah, for me to sit down and produce these problems, that's not really my wheelhouse, but I can really speak to an authentic audience about how and I'm interpreting this concept, and I can write this paper as though I was writing to the, Department of Transportation, and have a student shine in the way that they shine. And so hopefully what my intention, what our intention is that over time, you're going to start to see this sort of like menu of ways that a student can show what they know, so that if they're so they don't feel pigeonholed into this like one type of way. I always know that there's this other way that I can also demonstrate this, that, I've picked up on things in math. And so that's where we're headed. And that's where I'd like to see, I'm looking for, and sometimes these things take a while to really develop and grow teeth, but that's where we're going. Hopefully that answers your question.
It sounds very very hopeful, actually. I like the sound of that a lot. Thank you.
For other trustee questions? I'll look to say Marianne.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. So I know we touched briefly on physics, HL2, in the IB level, but I don't think I think physics is the most pronounced one, right? You had 6 students in that last year, whereas in the AP physics you had 31 students. The HL is the second year. The AP physics is HL first year. Bio, you have 60 students in AP Bio, which is HL by IB Bio HL1. That's 60 students. By the time you get to HL2, you have 14 students. You see the same thing in computer science. You have 9 students in computer science 1. By the time you get to computer science 2, you have 3. The same thing happens in higher level calculus. You have a drop off in BC. So I guess my question is, you have these courses, the higher level courses where there's not a lot of enrollment. And while we need to afford every student every opportunity, obviously when you tie up resources for a small number of students, you take away those resources from other students. So that's one aspect of it. But I guess the more interesting question to me would be, how do you engage students to challenge themselves into that higher level? And why is that not happening? Not just in physics, but it's seen in these, in bio, in computer science, in calculus, the numbers decline pretty dramatically.
Thank you for the question. Certainly, speaking for science, obviously, the quandary with science to me is always, if you take a student that wants to, is college bound, wants to go to a competitive school, you want to make sure that they have a palette of all the different disciplines. So on their transcript, you really want to make sure they have a living environment, earth science, chemistry, and then and physics, and then along with the college level. So, because colleges are looking for that complete package of all the science courses. To do that and commit to a second year of one of those would usually involve some type of doubling up on science. So I think that's probably the biggest factor in why we see enrollment decline so much to that second year, because there is a large commitment factor to doing that. I mean, one thing specifically, which I will let the board know about, Carol and I had mentioned in my presentation, we had spoken with physics teachers. So next year, so in this course catalog for next year that will be coming out, we are putting in the first year of physics just as AP physics. So what that does is we're not committing anymore to the second year being HL2, at least right now. I mean, it's advertising purposes right now, because if you advertise it as IBHL, you have to offer that second year regardless of the amounts of students. So by doing this, we feel we can better assess how many students want to go on to a second year, make more of a spot decision on what we would offer, and look into other type of second year offerings, like perhaps just offering AP at the calculus level for those students that are co-seated in the class. So, you know, we're hoping that that will make somewhat of a difference. I know it's very specific just to the physics part of your question.
Well, it's always been my argument against IB is because you now, in order to be a diploma candidate and be an engineer or a pre-med, you're requiring these kids to double up. And if you want to talk about stress, doubling up in science at the secondary level and eliminating opportunities that they would need in order to get into an elite engineering program. So to me, that just, that just makes my case that this, this is not a good use of resources when you have six students and you're not, it was always AP physics.
Right, but I think to your point, I think that a lot of schools, even if they're not an IB school, I think they face a similar quandary in the sense that for engineering, for those students that are looking for the Carnegie Mellons of the world and want to get into a true engineering program, the ability to have that second college level physics course is very important to their acceptance into those programs. And that's always going to be a very, very small percentage of the overall enrollment in the school. And those students probably still need to double up in those schools with a biology. Because if you're committing yourself to 2 years of physics at some point, or 2 years of bio, if you're pre-med and you want to get into a 5-year med program or a 6-year med program, then you probably would want the opportunity to take a second year of a college level bio. And then you're still going to be hit with one year where you have to double up. I think the IB problem is more that you might be looking at 2 years of doubling up. I think that would be that would be
my point.
Yeah,
2
that would
years
be
of doubling
yeah,
up.
that would be the extreme case. And I think by making some of the changes, with not advertising, with not offering the physics first year with the IP tag on it anymore, I think that gives us a little more flexibility to try and help that out.
But I do think it's
Yeah.
a greater issue than just a physics issue because you do have a significant decline in enrollment in the IB biology as well. So, I mean, not as bad because now you have at least 25 students to see the class. But I do think it's, we're offering it. How do you engage students to get into those second years? How do you engage students to do the BC calculus? Is there a different avenue with the dual enrollment for students to pursue that opportunity? Because that's part of the dual enrollment. You could see the calculus in there. Is that taking away from our enrollment in the calculus in the classroom setting? And is that really what we want to achieve? We want to give students more opportunities, but are we now, because we have dual enrollment, taking away from enrollment in a BC Calc course right here in our school?
Yeah, I'll just chime in a little bit on that. I think the dual enrollment is really, co-listed with current courses, so that's less of an issue. And I would say, with some of these issues and what Steve was speaking to, and what Steve, Carol, Eric, and I and Dan Doherty met about in terms of this physics change is in response to the study from last year on APIB. We did see a science issue. I will say, to Steve's point, totally agree that in AP only schools too that are neighboring us, when you get to that level, it does engender a need to double up when you get to, because of 2-year sequences, double period mandated sciences, and just not enough time because of prerequisites that are mandated that you need for those courses. I do think you see that is why you do see the double acceleration in some districts, so they can get to those courses earlier. But for those kids, even in the neighboring districts who don't double accelerate, it is challenging to get past calculus, to get to a BC, certainly to get to a linear algebra or a multivariable calculus. So I do think there are some issues. It is a mix of issues with the 2-year IB sequences in science, which we are addressing in response to that last year. But even just overall, with whatever framework you have, I do think there's an issue there that we'll continue to work on.
Trustee Colasiopa?
I just wanted to first say thank you so much for all the information. The volume of information and the detail that you provided. All three were amazing, and I just want to thank you for all the hard work you put into that. The way you write about educating our students, and it's so innovative and thoughtful, and it's impressive, and I just want to say that I really appreciate it. I think our scores compared regionally are, something to be very proud of. We're obviously highly ranked, and we should be extremely proud of that. I just want to say thank you for paying so much attention to the subgroups, because I think that is really important, and to make sure that all students are receiving the same education, the same opportunities. So thank you for pointing that out, and for really paying close attention to it. And the only little comment I wanted to make is, I understand the point about midterms and how important they are, but I do also, like Maria, I worry about stress, and especially with our younger students, like 6th and 7th graders, where they've never had, or 6th graders who've never had midterms before. Just thinking about how we administer those, and if we can spread them out somehow, or not put them all in in a 2 or 3 day period. I understand the value. I just want to make sure that we do it in such a way that is least stressful.
Or I probably should have mentioned when I first brought up, the midterms start with 8th grade. Okay, so that's and even in 8th grade, it's only math and science because of the regions factor. And so like in 8th grade, social studies and English don't have midterms.
And this year's 9th graders are having their first midterms because of last year. Okay. Trustee.
Thanks again for these wonderful presentations. And I'm new here, so I was wondering, in the previous presentations, I've been so impressed by the different, the late yet, because my word finding is gone. Not yet, not late yet.
Not late yet.
The innovations in curriculum, I always would say to Dr. Smythe during Parent University, this is not the way I learned math. And I know that we're looking at our reading curriculum and approaching literacy differently. And you referred a couple of times to the NGSS. So I wondered if you could, for, again, the novices around from me, if you could kind of shape what that looks like in science. I heard it referenced in the teacher video that this is not how the kids' parents learn science. And since, I'm not in the classroom, and I'm interested in the framework around that and color commentary if it's available. I did hear them talk a lot about, and maybe this is something you'll talk about, the importance of failure and process over outcome, which is encouraging, of course, but I didn't know if there was more to that picture, and I'm interested in hearing just brief comments about it, if that's possible. With respect to the, I agree with, I was so proud to serve a district with all three of the presentations that we had before, where particularly the at-risk populations of learners are thriving. And it really does speak to the emphasis on individual learners and different learners. And it's something to be so proud of as a district, to value every learner. I always say, when you value the most at risk, all students benefit. And so thanks, Trustee Colasiopa, for highlighting that as well. And that's really, there was a lot of material, so forgive me if I did miss in the backup material more color commentary on NGSS, but that's really what I was most interested in learning more about.
Eve, as you approach the podium, I'll also just go into one of my questions. Feedback's perfectly. For the next generation science standards, as you're giving the color, I guess it wouldn't hurt if you're comfortable, maybe either speaking to the general local educator community feelings about them, if or about us internally, if we feel they're appropriate. I mean,
oh yeah, certainly, yeah. Thanks. No, the teachers are especially elementary through 8th grade, but only because, like I said earlier, the excuse me, the teachers of Regents classes now feel a little handcuffed because again they're teaching to an older exam. But just to so briefly, Next Generation Science Standards or NGSS have been probably since at least the past 7 years where the transition period started. They're phenomena based, so science teachers will look for a phenomena to explore with the class. Good example, whereas we maybe used to just teach about genetics, Mendelian genetics with the pea plants and Punnett squares and stuff. Now, something like that might start off with a video about a couple living in a region of South Africa to African American, to people of color married to each other. I'm quoting this because I've seen this and it was fantastic. Their first child is also a child of color. The second child is basically a white baby with blonde hair. It goes into albinoism and everything. So that phenomenon, the next 3 weeks of the class kind of are based on that video and all the investigations, whereas, students used to just, again, look at tall plants versus short plants. Now they're kind of, investigating why would that be? What do you want to know? It often starts off really with the phenomena occurring in natural phenomena, and then students being asked, well, what do you wonder about this? And really jotting down their wonderings and really giving all of those wonderings value at a point where the students really could be free to investigate almost anything they want to do, which, getting to Dave's point, that's the only place where the teachers get a little nervous, because how do you have 24 kids doing 24 different things? But, but it all kind of goes based on that. And then after what you wonder, now it becomes, what do you think? And you show that by either drawing a model or some sort of representation of what you then want to investigate. And it's all based around claim, evidence, reason, which, so it's really a reworking of the old scientific method, which, even though it was never intended to be linear, was always supposed to be intended that you could always come back to the hypothesis at the end. The way it was taught and the way it was presented, it felt very linear. You kind of felt like you started a hypothesis and you end up with a conclusion. And the conclusion either confirmed the hypothesis or didn't, and then on to the next thing. NGSS is definitely more of a cycle where you're constantly going back to, what your claims were, what's the evidence for that claim, can you connect the claims and evidence with reasoning that makes sense. And it really is a great way to teach, and the teachers are really are excited about it. They're excited about working with Paul next week, and it really is something where there's a real belief that this is the better way to do it.
Based on the initial part of your presentation, I would say yes, but I wanted to confirm. Good. So Bruce Springsteen is not coming next week?
It's the Bruce Springsteen of science.
All right.
Oh, sure. So thank you so much for all of the backup. Obviously, you put a lot of work into this in the presentations, but of course, every day with our students. I wanted to start talking about the subgroup performance. And I got lost in all the data. It was, I went down a wormhole. But one of the things that I noticed that no one really brought attention to was that across the subgroups, the disability category, the English learner category, the poverty category, the one subject area where there really, in most instances, if not all instances, where there was no discrepancy between the general population was science. I mean, it was actually fascinating. And it made me think that this is the one area where there is equity across the groups. And when we think about developing our science program, developing it more at the elementary school level, developing it more at the secondary level, I think we have to look at it as this is one area where students really do well, despite whatever hardship they have. And so
I was thinking this plays roles in counseling, right? Like our counselors should be encouraging all students to take more science because our struggling students do well in those areas. So I was happy to hear that so many of them are taking 4 sciences, like you said. But there are also areas that we are not doing well in terms of the subgroup, particularly, right, the ELL students. And of course, there's a very small N, right, some only 1 or 2. But this is an area that I think we really need to focus on to move those students up. And Carol, I got to say, I was really impressed. You provided all the measures of central tendency plus standard deviation. I felt like that was a gift to me. And if I went through all of those grade levels, and what you saw is as the grade level went up, the standard deviation increased, right? So what does that mean? As these children progress through the educational system, right? And it was only provided up to grade 5, but as they progress, the gap between performance is increasing, right? So the students who are doing well are going up, and the students who are doing poorly are falling down, and now you have a bigger gap between them. So what does this actually mean in terms of education? It means our teachers, as they go up, have to become better and better at differentiation, right? And so that really needs to be a focus, because if they are not providing targeted differentiation as the students go up, what's going to happen? The gap between the students doing well and the students that are struggling start to have it starts to almost produce exponentially as you go on. So I thought that was interesting. So one area that I think we need, which ties to this, that I think we need to focus on is we provide lots of AIS, right? And we are using that STAR data, right, in general, to provide these AIS interventions. The problem with AIS and RTI is that you're providing an intervention where you don't really have an idea of what the real problem is, right? So these computerized adaptive testing, right, they spit out a score, right? And you use that. But of course, we know computerized testing where nobody's getting behavioral observations is not always the best way to test, but it's a way to test sort of mass students at once, right? But I think when we look at those results, and you guys have them in terms of like intervention, urgent intervention, I think it would be good to establish criteria that triggers not just AIS, but that triggers actual assessment of the child, right? You're not talking about a lot of students that fall into those categories. And even if you did not use resources to provide a full psychoeducational assessment, I think if you provided a test like the Pfeiffer, which is not just telling you that there is a deficit, but is providing the specific neurological underpinnings of why the problem might be occurring, then you apply a intervention that is highly, highly targeted. So I'll explain it a little bit more. So if you're identifying kids need math assessment, right, you might from the STAR find out that they have a problem with algebra, or a problem with, I don't know, arithmetic, right? The additional testing is able to tell you, well, is the problem with semantic knowledge of mathematical concepts? Is it spatial reasoning, right? Is it math retrieval? What is the specific area? And then it goes one step farther, right? And it's able to basically tell you, it's able to tell you what types of mathematical habits does the child have? Like, do they over rely on counting on their fingers, right? So then when you provide the AIS intervention, the teacher and the specialist is able to hone in on what the problem is, right? So if as the students progress through the grade levels, if it kind of seems like they struggle more and more and more, right? Maybe one of the issues is the intervention is not targeted enough because we don't have the data.
Thank you. Yes, when we use our RTI criteria, it's not just the STAR data, but it's
Right,
a full repertoire of assessment data. And to your point, we've definitely trained all of our AIS providers in the use of the FAM and gotten really good information. So that's really become a growing tool in our strategy or way of really figuring out what it is that kids need. We're using it more and more often, but to your point, I think it's a very valuable tool. And I also just wanted to circle back to your first point about the English language learners. That's absolutely an area of focus for us. And Anna Aguiar has actually done a lot of really good professional development with strategies to help us meet the needs of those learners, but it definitely continues to be an area of focus.
Thank you. Thank you. And so I do want to mention one other thing. Obviously, there are lots of learning disabilities. The one that gets the most attention is dyslexia, right? Nobody talks about dyscalculia. And what happens is people have math disabilities, and I want to make sure that we are assessing for it because often it is comorbid with dyslexia. So the student gets diagnosed with the dyslexia and the dyscalculia is forgotten about, right? And we know that 50% of kids who have dyscalculia also have a language-based learning disability that often trumps, right? Becomes sort of the focus. So I want to make sure that teachers and parents and our special ed department doesn't forget about this other learning disability that about 6% of our student population has. And because of that, I think we also have to look at the accommodations that we provide. So I'm so impressed over the years we are talking about assistive technology. There is not a board meeting that I think goes by that it is not mentioned. The one area that I think we can improve is the assistive technology for math.
Thank you. I agree with those points.
Thank you. I won't be long. I wanted to go back to the beginning of the backup, and that you asked everyone to prepare for the meetings by asking about how our students achieved, how we move them toward academic growth, what our goals are for this year, how equitable our success is, which we know has been your focus since I first became a member of this board, and also how you're moving students toward that growth in ways that relate to the SVOs and our strategic plan. I really appreciated in the video seeing the thought process of our faculty working these things through, and they deserve so much of the credit for this. They're the ones who are there. So I want to explicitly appreciate them for doing that work and for being introspective and for being the kind of district that is intentional in the way that we think about these things. The focus of those groups that were part of the interview, part of the video, was about really the SVOs, and I guess I do have a question that I just want to pose, which is, they talk about fact fluency, sort of the more basic steps. And we've talked here about in the humanities, about grammar and about basic stuff. I guess I would like to have an overt assurance that reliance on the SVOs will get us to mastery. That's my question.
The SVOs factor into all of those pieces. So I think the SVOs factor into those basic skills, fact fluency, phonemic awareness, and building those foundations in both the SVOs and those basic skills is really what allows the kids to do that higher level thinking pieces. So I think it's really for us, how do we build that continuum of experience so that they have those firm foundations in the skills, but also the SVOs, so they can, really shine with those higher level progression skills in the SVOs and also the higher level thinking in the disciplines. So I think that's our constant challenge.
We believe it. We've seen it. We also, it's very, we've had a very clear linear progression over a decade that has been seismically interrupted in these last couple of years. So the data is there and it's helpful, but where we're going, where we've been, what we're achieving has been interrupted so much. It is a little, the data is so helpful, and yet also very hard to tell what the reasons for that are. To Trustee Rizzo's question about whether or not, or I guess it was Rich who had raised it, the idea of the no harm policy and what effect that had. It's hard to tell, right? It's hard to tell. But we know it was there. We know that some of the information is there, but the data that we get will help us over a continuing period going forward. I'm hoping that we can, because we didn't backslide to where we were 10 years ago at all. We had reached heights, we had gone in a certain direction, and we're still really succeeding in so many different ways. And so it's heartening to hear that the SEOs will continue to be the focus, and to see the faculty who are so invested in it. It's no longer really learning; it's there. I was going to ask Amy a very straightforward question. If you could just give us, we saw in the backup an example of a 5th grade astronomy class in science, but I guess I'd like an example of a performance-based assessment at a higher level math class and what that might look like.
Sure. It's funny. I was just having a conversation with a calculus teacher yesterday. Yesterday, he was in there. Yeah. Today, and he came to me and said, I've been thinking about a performance task, and I'd love to, and I want to bounce it off of you because I really, and it's just so collegial. This is how everybody works. And so we looked at it together, and he said, I was looking at this data set. He's in an optimization unit. And I'm looking at this data set, and he likes river rafting, and he's interested in this particular area of the Catskills, and he says that there's this website, it's a government website that shows the water levels as over any period of dates that you choose. So along with that, it'll show a visual graph. And in some units of higher level math, you're interested in the rate at which a curve is increasing or increasing rate or decreasing rate, and some such things. And you can kind of theoretically learn how to identify points on a graph that will tell you, and you can kind of spit back, yes, this graph is, the concavity is such between these points. But however, when you apply it to looking at the graph of the water levels with regards to, was there a recent natural disaster, like was there a recent hurricane? So we happen to know that Hurricane Irene took place on November 28th, 2011, something just about right. And several days later, so this goes into actually an interdisciplinary discussion of when will the water levels rise? Basically, will it be immediate? Well, actually, no. The tributaries to whatever river, we're looking at the Connecticut River, will rise days later based on filling, right? So now we're looking at the levels of water over time, and the task. So he says, how do we turn this into a performance task? Because it's so fascinating. It's something we really sink our teeth into and derive meaning from based on the calculus that we're learning. And so we talked about, like, well, how about we look for an audience who would be interested in an analysis of this type of thing. So I said, well, what, does action need to be taken at a certain water level? Does somebody need to persuade or convince somebody that it's time to worry about road closures? It's time to worry about, some sort of repairs. And so he devised a task where students would, either be writing news articles or writing letters to the Department of Transportation, or, trying to convey their understanding, but without using such technical terminology that it's meaningless. It has to fall with meaning on the person who's reading it. as it relates to calculus. So that's kind of, I know that was long-winded, but I hope it painted a picture of what it might look like, as you're learning these higher level things, but you're also applying them and transferring them, and using other disciplines to help you understand it.
It's a perfect example. I actually got trapped upstate during that storm.
Yeah.
And earlier in the weekend, there was we had gone for a hike, and there was a little tributary, there was a little creek that we had just stepped over to get to the other side. And we went and looked at it maybe an hour after the storm it was 40 feet wide. There were trees being carried away in it. We tried to get home. There was a river that had gotten so high it had carried a house away. It crashed into an overpass. And I said, that's it. I'm kids. We're going back. So we got trapped up there. But that's a practical application, and the speed with which those things happen is, in its essence, a math problem. Perfect.
Six problem.
And a physics problem. Yeah, and science. Why is this happening? But yes, other trustees have comments, questions before we move on.
There's one thing that I feel like I should just mention. We did not talk about gender in science and gender in math, and there was a big push to get kids involved. Girls involved in science and math. And I mean, just over the last couple of years, it's so obvious things really have changed, right? If you walk into any bookstore, sometimes I wonder if boys can be scientists or mathematicians, right? I'm curious whether we have any data on that.
I think going back about 5 years, we saw gender gaps, and I think over time those have actually gone away. I don't think we could say absolutely they're the result of our efforts, but we definitely have made efforts to engage females more explicitly, and also to work on mindsets and make sure that all of our students feel a home in the STEM fields.
One thing I was going to say, Carol, the assured experiences that you've built, especially in STEM at a young age, I think has kind of insulated that selection bias that you would see traditionally. So I think the exposure to all students might have had an impact, but we have to do more study on it.
That's fascinating. Going forward, maybe this was a lot of data in terms of testing data, but we should also be looking at testing in terms of kids' attitudes toward math and attitudes about their own mathematician in them. And because really you can't perform well in math or science, right? If you have this sort of perception that you're bad at it, right? They're really intrinsically linked. So maybe going forward, that's something that we can also.
Thank you to the trustees. Thank you to our Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I had said in the beginning I was going to let everybody else.
Oh, Rich, no, you please come back.
No. What I'm going to say is I appreciate the discussion that went on. My questions are kind of specific, and I would actually think I'd rather just speak to Carol and Steve at another time about them. That's okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'm sorry. Is there anyone else I catch? All right. So with that, I will thank our administrators who were here. I appreciate it. It is probably getting close to late, so thank you very much. And we will move on. Thank you to Dr. Smythe and Dr. Zublionis as well, of course, for putting this all in motion. We now have our second comments from the public period. Is there anyone here who would like to make a comment from the public? Take care. Thank you. Make sure everyone has an opportunity, but I'm not going to linger either. Okay. We will officially close our second public comment. Action item 11, I believe I would like we need a motion to table this, Betty, if we're going to table? Yeah, we'll make it. I would like to ask for a motion I'll make the motion to table action item 11, which is a side letter. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion or comments or questions on the move to motion? Move to table? All in favor of the tabling? Aye. Now this I think I have, which is I'd like to ask for a motion to discuss action 12 personnel. Is there a motion? And a second? Thank you. At this time, I would like to make a motion to amend A, if everyone can wants to pull it up. Betty, you have the official language? after the words through June 30th, 2023, I would like to remove the words that say, as per the terms and conditions of the side letter dated January 4th, 2023 between the, strike that and replace it with pending approval of a side letter between the Board of Education and the NSSFE. That's my motion. Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
And comments or questions on that motion alone? All in favor of approval of that motion? Aye, that's 7. Thank you, trustees. And now I will open up, well, now it is open for other general comments and discussion on action 12A through J. I mean, okay.
My only other comment
yeah,
is, Ms. Limpensky is in the room,
Okay,
and our congratulations to her on her appointment.
thank you very much. We're looking
Congratulations.
forward to it. We're going to vote. I have a feeling it's going to be really awkward. All in favor of action items, action on personnel A through J. Is there a motion? I'm sorry. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. And congratulations officially. Yes. Action item 11. Sorry, whoa, hello. Hold it together, Dave. Action item 13, policy adoption. Is there a motion on these two policies, 4340, community ed, and 4452, private tutoring and professional services? Thank you. And a second? Thank you.
A motion on this item. I would like to separate the vote from the, on the community ed policy from the tutoring policy, to have two separate votes.
There's a second for the motion to separate the vote. Okay. Comments or questions on the reason? I guess the reason is you want to vote on it separately. It's pretty clear, but if you have
The community ed policy, as I mentioned in our discussion of it, allows middle school students to participate in community education, subject to, of course, approval. I don't agree with that change. I understand there's compelling circumstances that created that change, but I don't think exceptions are the way we make policies. Policy should be made upon sound reason, not upon where we see there might be an exception to the policy. And I understand that the language went to the attorneys, but I'm an attorney and I'm going to tell you, when a client calls me up and says, this is what we want to do, how do we do it? And what's the best way to do it? I make it work, right? Unless it's, illegal, but you make it work. So having counsel review the policy doesn't give me any assurance that it's the right decision. And I am still very uncomfortable with putting a middle school student in with a bunch of adults, even with the parent present. It's just my personal preference. I just don't like it. We go through great lengths, do background checks and fingerprinting on everyone who comes in our buildings, who comes in contact with our students. To allow a middle school student to be placed in that environment, I feel it just violates our safety protocol. And I understand there will be parents present, whatever. I'm just not comfortable with it.
Fair enough. We will now just, any other thoughts about the separation of the two? Thoughts, but comments people want to verbalize. With that, we will ask for a vote on the motion to separate the two policy votes. All in favor of the separation? Aye. Okay, so now we'll ask for any other discussion on 4340 community ed programs.
I hear Trustee Russo's point. I definitely see where you're coming from. I will say though, I feel like the language is pretty clear that we have to, in order for a middle schooler to attend, there has to be permission granted by the course instructor, the community education director, and the superintendent. So I feel like this is not going to be something that's going to happen all the time. But if there is a middle schooler, like in the case we saw where someone is participating in like a band program that is, enhancing their experience, I would like them to have that opportunity.
I feel similarly. I think the concerns that Marianne and other trustees had raised about this were valid, are valid, but I do think that the vetting that we have and the requirement of a parent presence is, again, in my point of view, not about the exception for the situation, but about a recognition that for certain students, this experience to participate in these ensembles is something that is going to be really, really vital to their experience in a way that maybe they couldn't get and that our community education can provide. So I'm comfortable proceeding with it myself. That's why I'll be voting yes, but please.
I also think that the adjustment in this policy and this amendment is also using language to clarify a procedure to protect it from accidentally happening, so that there's a mechanism to protect the students from just showing up at these middle school students from just showing up at these community ed classes and us as a district not having clear procedures to protect that from happening. So that's also part of the spirit of this revised policy.
Comments before we vote on 4340? Okay, I'll call the vote. All in favor of 4340 revision, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay. And we will now ask for any comments on 4452, the revised tutoring policy. Any comments, questions? Oh, we did it on this. Okay, I thought the separation activated both, but I'd like to ask for a motion on 4452 policy. Thank you. And a second. Thank you. Thank you, Betty. I just like, for as long as I do this, always help me, correct me. Thank you. Any comments or questions on 4452? Are you raising your hand? You want to make a comment? Yeah.
But just
Please.
mention, there was discussion at our previous meeting about why we have made the changes that we've made. I wanted to just talk a little bit about my own approach here. I do feel that, we have tried to listen to a lot of voices about this policy, and we have policy committee spent truly the entire fall semester of its meetings, which numbered at least 6 or 7, I think, on this policy. So it has been a very dedicated effort to try to get it right. I think that, however, it's a work in progress, in my own opinion. Getting it, there is no perfection here. There is just a constant effort and devotion to improving it. And I think we have made significant changes that get us along that path. I myself do feel that we have a ways to go, but that we're at a point where we have to put it out there. We have to the extent that we've been able to respond to some of the issues that we've heard about. I think that the athletic review that we've talked about wanting to do in a sort of deep dive way at the right time will inform and must inform if changes are going to be needed again, as will actual implementation. So I'm hopeful, though I have my own reservations, I am at a point where I think I can vote in favor of this.
Just add that, the spirit of addressing this policy was the recognition that the previous iteration had the potential. It is yet to be determined whether it was the hindrance for attracting talent for our coaching staff. So I think the amendments that we've made, address that hopefully. And as Trustee Maska just said, these are living documents that are able to be reviewed, and in order to understand the unintended consequences potentially of what could or could not be a Pandora's box, we have to sort of live with the consequences of the revised policy before we can address if it's sufficient, insufficient, because it's a new approach for us as a district, and it's something to kind of watch and wait.
Just want to thank the policy committee because I can see how much work went into this, and I really think that you did such a good job in both, trying to find that balance between the conflict of interest and making sure that we as a district are as competitive as we can be in our hiring practices. And I think you did an excellent job. So I just want to say thank you.
I just want to point out that the reason why the policy was changed was there was an exception that created the problem, and that we made that first change 4 or 5 years ago, whenever it was. So, look, it is what it is, and hopefully we'll look at the supervision piece in totality and athletic advisory, recruiting of coaches in athletic advisory, all those things that we want to do to give the best opportunity for our student athletes.
Again, I want to thank you, Marianne, for pointing out that there was a reason why it was in the form it was in. It is one of the things that has had me so conflicted about this is that, I've really toyed with, can I myself vote in favor of this even after all the work we've done on it, because I want perfection. I want to still be guaranteeing that we're preventing the conflict of interest. And I don't think that's actually feasible. But after, living through this experience with my fellow policy committee members, and hearing, dedicated speakers like a certain president of the Booster Club, who I really appreciate his attendance and comments. I think that, we really have tried to stay within that spirit, but open up some other possibilities. I'm eager also to see if this is going to make a difference in hiring, since I think there's been public discussion about there being some other significant reasons why hiring is difficult. And those, of course, are a lot, even more challenging probably to address over time, but hope springs eternal.
Comments?
I didn't want to speak before Trustee Bellotti. Okay. Or anybody else, but I did want to thank the policy committee, and this was an issue that did arise this year. I think what's hard, and I'm only 4 years into the policy game, but just reading legislation, historical, and it's always problematic when you have a policy or a law that handles so many unique things in one. And so, and Trustee Russo has pointed this out, Trustee Maska just did. I think these, whether it's music or tutoring or athletics, they're united by being a tutoring thing, private service thing, but they each also have other aspects that we're going to be looking at. We have the athletic policy review from several years ago that we're going to be looking at. With private tutoring for classroom instruction, we're looking at improving what we do inside the school so that parents don't have to seek tutoring out, but they should have a right to, of course. So, each of these pieces have their own concerns, but they're combined in this one policy. And you always see in any of the policies cross references, but I do want to also, I'm not just saying that because they're my employers, but the board has been very supportive in providing additional coaches that we have asked for, Mr. Lang, Dr. Smythe, and I, and we do see the totality of the support of athletics in many aspects, also with the fine and performing arts, also with our teachers, of course, and academics. So I think the evaluation of coaches, finding people in general has just become so difficult in the last, couple of years, especially in the past year. even, policy aside, it's challenging to find and to replace coaches who leave. So, I think this is one piece. I think there is much more work to be done in all areas that we're going to continue to do. Thank you.
Chris, from my perspective, I'll be brief. We certainly are obviously aware of all that's been discussed in the community about this. But one of the things, every time I've spoken about it with you, you have been laser focused on the student experience and what this means for our students. And I know the policy committee has been as well. And that's been, for me, I think, putting this in the scales of what the policy was, what the potential issues that arise without a policy like this, and finding that middle ground has been my goal, because I think without that middle ground, there may be circumstances where student experience may be overly hindered in either direction. Certainly, we've seen it. And the policy committee is to be commended for going through this. I know none of us are blind to the time it takes to go through this, whether it's because of that policy committee that's really churned this through on over and over and over again to get to this point. But that a policy this complex that affects so many things that involves, to some degree, who we are as a district does take some time to go through. And so I am glad that we are at a point of voting. I'm glad that we are ready to move forward, and I'm looking forward to good outcomes for those kids, for our student athletes, and for their families. So with that, if there's no more comments or discussion, I will call the vote on the revised 4452. I don't really need my glasses. I know that number by heart now. Everyone in favor? Aye. There we go. Okay. Action 14. Some things can go very fast, and the acceptance of a donation from the Seacliff PCA, I think, will be one of those. Is there a motion? I heard a second. Any comments or questions other than our sincere thanks? Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Action 15, disposal of inventory. Is there a motion? And a second. I heard it. Comments or questions? All in favor? Aye. Action 16A and B, which is approval of some change orders related to some construction projects in the district. Is there a motion? And I heard a second. Comments? Go for it.
So some of these change orders, we've had some difficulty with some people, with some contractors. So I just want to make sure that we are getting, as part of all the change orders and payments, that we're getting the appropriate waivers and lien releases from the contractors and the suppliers, as well as the contractors, for payment, and that we have all that in order so that we have the backup to their end of a dispute arise.
I could definitely comment on that, and we'll comment more on that in our updates to the board and certainly our next meeting. But we've made our construction management company and the new personnel within that company that's been helping us make great progress dealing with this company, this contractor in particular, and other districts. The liens have been cleared. I know we have construction steering committee on Monday. We'll talk. That will come up certainly. There's been tremendous progress there. We are getting towards substantial completion on those projects.
Well, it's been less public, but Marianne is right. This has been also a saga. This saga doesn't end with the vote. Any other comments or questions on these change orders? All in favor? Aye. Action 17, A through E, 5 contracts to approve. Is there a motion? And a second? Thank you. Comments or questions? Discussion?
Unfortunately, I have a question on DHC. DHC has rendered valuable services to us, in particular with the LIPA situation. With the LIPA issue largely being resolved, and for various reasons, people have questioned the specificity of the contract, but because it involved litigation. Really, the details were not really publicly known. I personally have no problem if we're going to continue using a public relations, not public, a lobbying legislative group, keeping with the VHC. What I would like is, because the circumstances have changed, is moving forward, because this contract can be terminated on 30 days notice, as all personal service contracts can, is to get a better understanding of the scope of their services that they're going to be providing for us, in light of the changed circumstances. Are there going to be other services? We used to get some newsletters from VHC years ago, and I haven't seen any of those, with all sorts of legislation that is coming out that may affect them, that they would have access to them, so they do on a regular basis for their clients. So I think, for me personally, I'm not really sure what their role is going to be moving forward in light of the changed circumstances. And I feel as a trustee, even though the number is not a significant number in the scheme of a $117 million budget, I still feel it's taxpayer money. And I personally don't have a good understanding, despite having seen different lobbying groups, not just this one, but we had other lobbyists when I first started, what their role is going to be going forward in light of the changes.
I think it's an excellent point, and it has been raised by other trustees as well in questions to me, and totally agree with everything you're saying. I think, their role was so clear last year because of what we were going through. It was like triage, it was like emergency care. And now what is that going to look like going forward? So I think that is incumbent upon me to provide more specific information, but to work with them to get that information. I will say, I think, securing funding, grant funding, sustainable revenue solutions for our loss of revenue, and this funding, this revenue transition that we're going through, that is the major focus, but we'll definitely get much more fine-grained on that on an ongoing basis.
And I would suggest that we would have a meeting with them as a board, maybe an executive session, to refine what those duties and strategies are, what anticipated tasks they will be performing. Obviously, they can't guarantee outcomes, but what tasks they will be performing. I almost would like, a side letter to this agreement or amendment to this agreement that provides more detail on what we can expect for $5,500 a month. So scope of services, yeah, and an addenda to the agreement that's saying for $5,500. I mean, you don't buy any contract, right, where it doesn't say this is what you're getting.
I agree, and I think it will be helpful for justifying this funds for the public too, to see like the types of expectations we have as a district of an organization like this. For example, when we had the legislative breakfast, they alluded to organizing a meeting with us with the Nassau County, what is the group? IGA organization. So, the deliverables of getting us in the room with our legislators. I mean, we had three of them in the room with us, but there are more. So I think it would be helpful for that kind of clarity and specificity to understand.
I also agree. I think Trustee Russo brought up some very good points. A number of years ago, we did ask as a board to get regular updates in terms of the services that were being provided, and we were told it was going to happen, and it didn't. So I'm glad she brought this up because I think it's very important.
And we were also told that we would get the regular newsletters, and when we had a different contact at DHC, we had them, and then we decided we didn't need a lobbyist for a while. Now, when they came back, there was a change in the political landscape, so a different contact person was appointed for us that was more appropriate with the power shift in the government. And once the other person was not our contact any longer, we didn't get those newsletters anymore. And they were really generic newsletters. But there's also stuff in Albany going on about education, about funding, about IDA, and all of that was in those newsletters. You know, and I'm sure they're putting that out. They don't. It's not any extra effort to put us on the mailing list.
The comment, I think, from a transparency perspective, which you alluded to, it's important for the community to understand what we're doing with them as well. Obviously, we have discussed from this podium and throughout the community that, as we mentioned earlier, although the legal aspect of the LIPA situation is 98% behind us, other than making sure we adhere in terms of all the agreements, the funding implications are ongoing, and so that will be the focus. But I think Chris, you summarized it well, to be able to provide that scope of work and working with them to the board, and then putting that in a format that the community can understand where their tax dollars are going is valuable and necessary, as the board, as my trustees have said. Any other comments or questions on these, on that, or any? Sorry, well, Maria, then Lisa.
It's a question about the rider to the contracts for the middle school trips. I realize without Jamie here, this might not be answerable tonight, but I just noticed it late this afternoon. I'm not clear in item 3A on the 2A. Requires the bus company to provide at least 3 names and a recent driver license abstract for a pool of drivers that can be assigned to the charter trip. I just don't quite understand that we're actually contracting for more than 3 buses. And so what Andrew?
Saying if they're only giving us 3 names as the pool, but we're going to have, their buses are 56 seats and we have 200 kids.
And at least for the Philadelphia trip, and I didn't double check on the Boston trip, but there's 5. We're hiring 5 buses. So I'm just trying to, it's a little, it doesn't, it's not adding up in my head. And then in item 3, we do reserve the right to reject any driver who's not qualified. And there was something in here, I'm sorry, forgive me, didn't highlight the second piece of it that I wanted to ask about. I
wonder if the bus, I thought maybe it was 3 per bus, like they had to provide 3 names per bus, like as if they didn't know which driver would be driving that bus, but I could be wrong.
Probably should have submitted this question before.
Will we be doing our own background checks on drivers?
No, they all have to.
Oh, they're required, yeah. But it just looked like a weird.
So let's clarify what they mean by the pool. Is it 3 people per bus? Because they don't know. I think I would infer, as Trustee Colasiopa did, that they're going to give us those names. If someone is sick, someone just doesn't show, whatever else it is, you want to make sure you're okay, and that we have 3 people going, so you don't show up in the morning and you're like, who's this guy?
This was, and the rider was added by our council. It was part, in order to provide greater protections and assurances for us. So I can clarify with the council on the reason for that, but I do think that's what it was.
The trip or the delay it. It's not an emergency to do it.
No, are we not voting on it, or wait?
We're voting to approve it, but I
Okay.
think
Oh, okay. Yeah.
our council has seen it, has approved it. We want clarification.
Yeah. The trips look fantastic.
Just curious, who's going to Boston? Who's Boston's 8th grade?
Grade level.
Philly is 7th.
Philly.
6 used to do Greenkill, which is not there. So
Frost Valley.
Is it Frost Valley? Exactly. Yeah. Okay.
I like the agenda, like the itinerary.
Oh, it's great. I think I got a lot done. I'll be very tired.
It's a killer. You do it in one day.
Any other
They did it one day.
any other comments or questions on this section?
I do have it's a very, very
I'm sorry, Lisa. That's right.
quick comment on B, Richard Black, that I noticed late, so I'm sorry I didn't send it earlier, but if you go to the last page, the very last sentence, multiple broadcast camera views. If you could just cross it out and spell multiple correctly, I would be very happy. Thank you.
Very good. I have a comment that it's going to be a very vague one, which is that this is not a criticism. It is not anything I'm going to be opposed, and I love our dramatic productions. They get better every year. They're awesome. But I did go back through several previous approvals of the cost of the costuming, and I have them in a chart. They are certainly clear. I'm not affiliated with any costuming for plays, but I am in the uniform industry, so I certainly know that things have gone up. But maybe not at the same slope that this chart. I think I did a project-based assessment myself. So let's just say that's just on the radar, even though it's awesome and I'm not looking to get in the way of anything. But as future negotiations for these things happen, certainly, Little Mermaid is going to have more costuming than the Curious Incident of the Dog at Night. But, it's on the radar.
I just want to, since you brought it up. So we had an agreement with someone years ago. She was she took over a costuming company that we had previously used, and we got a very good deal on it because she was a community member, and an arts angel. But I've raised this before. When you are a theater major in a university, you have to do every aspect. So my son's emphasis was lighting design, but he had to make costumes, and he had to do scenic design, and he had to usher the aisles. We have a fashion design program. We have these students who make this clothing. If you've ever been to their fashion show, they do one on their own as well as the senior fashion show where the seniors do their stuff. The stuff they make, the things they make are incredible. This would be an amazing opportunity if we actually had full-time technical theater person to combine our fashion design and our theater department and have our own internal costuming designing, or at least a class in it. Because it is something, believe it or not, if you're a theater major, you can do costume design. And in fact, one of the people in the interim who did it was a former student here, who was a very talented designer, graduated around the same time as my son. So I think there's a missed learning opportunity here by just farming it out and not thinking big picture, because I think in our theater department, one of the things we are missing is a true technical person. It doesn't even have to be a full-time position, but there were some, deficiencies missing in lighting. We used to have people who volunteered here who did scenic design as their real job. And we built a lot more of the scenery back in the day than we do now. So one of the problems, I think, that, the Fine Performing Arts people have had when they took over, when there was a shift, was we lost many of these volunteers because their children aged out and they no longer did the work. And now the cost of productions have gone up because now we are renting much more scenery. We are renting many more costumes, and it may be actually more cost effective to bring in someone who actually does this for a living. And it could be a part-time gig. It could be a 0.6, just like we started with the theater person, or full-time theater teacher. Bring someone in to do this kind of the technical end of theatrical production. And you could carry that over. They could do the lighting design for the concerts. They could do scenery for the concerts. It doesn't have to just be they could do sound design. We don't really have someone who really does sound here. I mean, these are things that students go to college for.
I love this, and I think you're bringing it up at the right time. We're entering budget season, right? And the idea is, how do we keep building these programs, right? How do we keep expanding them and making them about more than just being an actor or actress, right? Like,
Well, just to be fair,
yeah,
the amount of work the kids do behind the scenes for those plays, more of the names in those books are for the kids, moving stuff
Ah,
around and build and the sound and all this. So I don't disagree with any of this, but I think my initial point, which I'm sure everyone agrees with here, is the productions are amazing. I am not looking to take away from the productions at all. I'm just saying that as these costs increase at a noticeable speed, I think looking for options and alternatives for how to keep the quality and or introduce learning experiences and or reduce the cost.
And I'm
Maybe
not
in the readout,
disagreeing with that, and I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying that I've had children who have done. My daughter was a stage manager. My son was an actor, a musician, and the lighting designer, and he just sort of fell into the lighting design. But what I'm saying is, I think we're missing an opportunity to grow the program and the other technical. I'm not taking away from what anyone is doing, but I think we could do more and we could do it better if we looked into different alternatives. And maybe we can save some money.
Good points. Other comments on A through E on these contracts? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Action 18, which is Special Education Services Agreement. Is there a motion? And I heard a second. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Aye. Action 19, which is the approval of a stipulation of settlement. Is there a motion? And a second?
Yeah.
Thank you. Comments? All in favor? Aye. And number 20, the approval of a special education services agreements. Determinations. I'm sorry. The approval of the IEPs. Motion, thank you. Second. These are, of course, the official evaluation findings for our students.
Firing.
Any other comments or questions? All in favor? Aye. Unfinished business. Yes.
Just wanted to come full circle on the public comment that we've discussed doing for the Engineers Club development. I wanted to thank my fellow trustees who, for the discussion that we had about points that should be considered for public comment. Lisa Cashman also followed up with some great written help, as did Dave and Dr. Z. We've actually, in this, the 4 days leading up to today, 5 days, members of LAC and I and Chris and Dave have had many back and forths just trying to pull together this draft. I do not have a draft to present to the board tonight for your review, but we have made the decision that the public comment will be actually submitted by LAC, so it won't be so much a formal district position as specifically the members of the Legislative Action Committee. We will get it in time somehow by tomorrow. We are, and I will, ultimately distribute what we have submitted. But I wanted to assure everybody that all of the comments that have been made will be included in one form or another. We've made some good progress. We're just not quite there in the next 15 to 18 hours. We'll get it done. But I wanted to reiterate that the points I heard that we've been fleshing out, that we've been researching, making sure that we're saying salient points about them are the enrollment projections being made in the draft environmental impact statement about new student numbers, the bus pickup and roads to accommodate that, the potential impact on taxes should tax breaks be sought, potential impact on school taxes, obviously, and density calculations in terms of the alternative development that Lisa's been addressing. So those are where we're focusing. We have about 50% of the draft done, I guess I'd say, and I think actually I should say we have probably more than that, because the other 50% of it I think is going to be much more concise. That's where we are. Thank you.
Be interested in getting a copy when it's done.
All right. Yes, I will distribute it so everybody knows what we said.
Slack. I don't want to claim on that, but Brian Hanley certainly did a lot of the research work, and he really poured over a lot of these. Other unfinished business.
Related to the discussion earlier tonight, when Trustee Russo brought up the questions about balances being carried over in certain groups, I didn't pose it publicly, but I had actually written about that about a month ago. So I just want to reiterate that I also feel that's a very important piece that I really want some follow up on.
All right, thanks, Rich. For unfinished business, do we need to nominate someone to be Speaker of the House, or let's let someone else finish that business? Yeah. So is there any new business? Sure.
Sorry, guys. I don't know if anybody was watching Monday Night Football. I was actually watching it, and I saw, and you know, I'm a mother of a Pitt Panther. I saw that poor young man take that hit. And I don't know how many of you watch football, but there was a tackle and the helmet went in under the chest, into the chest, under the padding. So it brought me back to my days of yore when we were talking about the football helmets and the inadequacy of the football helmet. That type of injury is not that cardiac arrest, that type of injury in that area of the body between the shoulders and actually the knees is not that uncommon in sports. It's actually quite common. And when we were talking about the helmets, I proposed this. There was grant money out available. It's like Under Armour and Nike. They make protective gear that goes under the shirts and under the hat of players. That type of injury is common in baseball, where our ball is hit hard and it ends up in your chest. It's very common in soccer. I don't believe we ever pursued getting grant money for that kind of equipment for our athletes, but I would like to look into that, what kind of protective gear that we provide to our athletes. We talked about uniforms, and uniforms are important, but safety is a bigger priority. And there is equipment out there that can help prevent that kind of injury from happening. And we got the new helmets when a student ended up in the hospital in intensive care when he went down on his head after a tackle. I don't want to see one of our students get injured when there's a way to prevent it or minimize the injury. And also the other thing that I think is very important that I've brought up before that we've talked about, but I've never had a resolution on. What saved that football player's life was the quick CPR that was granted. Now, on a football game, we do not start the game until the doctor is there and the ambulance is there. That is not true for all our other sports. And frequently we have an athletic position there, that I don't know the right term, athletic trainer on the grounds, but we may have multiple games going on in multiple locations and only one athletic trainer. So now, who do we have on those fields that can grant CPR, that can give CPR? Do we have the right equipment there? Like a defibrillator? Do we have the right equipment there? Do we have someone trained to use that equipment? It doesn't necessarily have to be an athletic trainer, but I would like to know who was in attendance at these games. If an athletic trainer may be on the premises, but may not be elsewhere. And we also made the decision, we send our athletic trainer to the away football game because not every school has one, right? What are we doing on our away games for our students when they travel? It just brought home that whole, I mean, I literally like
It was
was
horrible.
watching the game and I caught my breath, and it just brought home that whole discussion. And I don't know that we ever resolved that.
I was just gonna say, yeah, it was horrifying. And I actually contemplated sending out a message to our students because I was worried about our athletes being worried, and I'm sure some of them are. So that's still something I want to think about with Carol and especially Eric and Don. But all of our coaches, and I'm not sure if this answers the question or not, have to be CPR and AED certified to coach in a New York State public school. So that is automatic. We do have AEDs. They know where they are. So that's thing one. The other thing is, Don and I have been talking about an additional part-time trainer. That is part of the budget. Certainly this is an even better justification, but we've heard from some parents about the trainer being pulled in too many directions. And, I think the one trainer works very well when you have a combined middle school, high school. It's harder, even though we have proximity. So those are just two things that we've been talking about.
But you're Mary for raising it and Chris for addressing it there and going forward. Other new business?
I think it's new business, but I was thinking back to the legislative breakfast, and Josh Lapizan said that he had grant money available. Was there any follow-up with that grant money discussion?
We had originally talked to Nicole, who's from DHC. I do need to follow up with him. I don't know how, I want to find more specifics, on that and how well publicized it was. But we certainly have ideas for, for example, the public use, that the grant would need to be able to be enjoyed by the community, whatever it is that you're using it for. So we certainly have some items that fit that description. So
I will say he sent out, I just got like a regular taxpayer update last week from him, and he had a listing of who received the grant. And it was not just schools. And I think we're gonna move on that. I believe he said he only had $1 million.
And it was first come, first serve.
Yeah. So, like Jericho was listed, and the ones that he told us, but also other places were listed who he did not mention.
No, he's not our legislator.
Miriam?
I had one other piece of new business. So, I've heard that there's going to be some training. I think I heard 16 teachers on IB. That may not be an accurate number. So I would like to know how many teachers are going to get training in IB, where the locations of the training are, what the costs are involved, how many days are going to be out of the classroom. Some of this training, I've seen it down in Florida. It's multiple days. It's airfare. It's accommodation. Some of it's been in Toms River. Some of it's been in Houston. Some of it's been in San Diego. And teachers are out 2-3 days. So I'd like to know how many classes are impacted that are going to be having substitute teachers for how many days. Of course, we'll have to add in the cost of the substitute teachers on top of the travel costs, meal allowances, accommodation, and the actual training.
Thanks. The administration will get that information. Any other new business? Right. Thank you, everyone. We'll adjourn the meeting.